Morning, Melissa.
Good morning, Steve. How are you?
Fantastic.
Good.
Good morning, Steve.
Good morning, Phyllis.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi, Phyllis. How are you?
I'm well. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
Good.
Good morning, one and all.
Yeah.
Yeah. Bright and chipper, are we?
Beautiful day.
Yeah.
Just four of us here right now, huh?
Yes.
Say what?
There's just four of us at this point.
Yeah.
Expected Nick by now.
Hey, Phyllis, good morning.
Good morning, Bill. How are you?
I'm fine. How about yourself?
I'm very well, thank you.
Morning, Nick.
Morning.
Oh, there he is. Hi, Nick.
Hi.
Morning.
Morning, Tom.
Good morning, Tom.
How are you, Bill?
I'm doing good. How about yourself?
Yeah, I can't complain. I could, but you don't want to listen.
I hear you.
Hey, Steve.
Good morning.
Yeah,
Morning, everyone.
that's what they tell us anyway.
Morning, Pat.
Good morning.
Morning.
Hello, is this thing on? Hello, hello?
Good
Morning,
morning.
Keith.
Morning.
Can you hear me now?
Hear me now. Yep. Well, I got my first shot of Moderna on Tuesday, and I think that kicked my ass almost as much as when I had the virus.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Brandon was in line in front of me, and he's still laid up. I had just one day of it, but Brandon's like 2 days into it.
Wow.
I got the Moderna too, Keith. I had the first day, the second one didn't bother me at all. The first one was, the first day I didn't feel so good with it, but
I had the chills, I had a fever, I had every symptom that they mentioned. I had a headache, a runny nose. I mean, I had the whole thing. But Brandon and I both had the virus back in January. And we think maybe because we had it and now we had the shot, that might be part of it.
That probably is.
Still short-term inconvenience for long-term benefit.
You better believe it. They say this other strain that's going through right now is pretty nasty.
Yeah.
Oh, all I had was a headache, but then I determined that wasn't from the vaccine. That was from Vicky.
No, I would have bet on Doers as opposed to.
You just got a hold of some bad scotch. Oh, well. Just a touch, Bill. That's all you need.
That's it. That's it. Just a touch.
Just a touch.
John, congratulations. You're out of the bar business.
Well, not quite.
Oh, my God.
Oh. The Ready Eagle was a little premature.
Well, that was the real estate portion of the whole issue, and the liquor control board transfer might happen a week from tomorrow. And then it'll be done.
Then it'll be celebration time.
Yeah. But thank you.
Melissa, I'm struggling with my views right now. It's 8 o'clock. How many people we got going here?
We've got three from the committee right now.
3 what from the committee?
We've got 3 people from the committee.
Do we know if Mr. Portner or Mr. Gallen are going to be with us?
I have not heard from them, no.
We'll give them one more minute.
Yeah, I'm not on the committee,
Who said that?
John.
Right. I meant John Gallen. If I said John, sorry. There's John Gallen.
Weiss Market, they have extra shots on 13th Street.
Peggy just told me that Weiss Markets on 13th Street has extra shots if somebody wants to get them. She got one yesterday because she's an ex-smoker from 25 years ago or whatever. But
He said they have a lot of no-shows.
yeah, there's a lot of people, I guess, double booked, and then there's a lot of no-shows.
I talked to Eric Esterbrook yesterday. He said the same thing. That's what they're starting to see. People are signing up at 4 or 5 different places, and then they get it one place and don't cancel the other 2 or 3.
Yeah.
He said-
I did it at the Highlands on Tuesday, and Eric was there, and he said they were going to do 600 there.
Good. The more the merrier.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Well, I don't know if Greg Portner's coming today or not. So let's call the meeting to order. Unless you want to do a roll call.
Sure. Keith Durr,
Here.
Tom Mull,
Here.
John Gallen,
Here.
Steve Brunner,
Here.
and Greg Portner.
Okay. At this point, we have any public comment?
Not from me this morning.
Okay. Moving on. We'll talk about the Herbine audit results. Nick, Phyllis, you want to take it away?
Go ahead, Nick. It's all yours.
I just want to make sure I can. Okay, it looks like I can scroll through. So I'm Nick Bieber, manager with Herbine & Company, who oversaw the audit for the Borough of Wyomissing for the December 31st, 2020 year end. So today I'll go over, I won't pull up the complete financial statement, but I'll go over some of the highlights and trend information, as well as the required communication letters. Just a little background on the audit. It's conducted under generally accepted auditing standards. And what our responsibility as auditors to do is to opine on whether the financial statements prepared are fairly presented in all material respects. And this is in conformity with the modified cash basis of accounting, which is in compliance with the Pennsylvania DCED requirements. So our opinion as auditors was an unmodified opinion over the financial statements, and this is a clean opinion from an independent auditor. So that's the highest level that can be issued. Looking at the general fund's budget to actual results for the 2020 year, overall, you'll see revenues were about 2.8% over budget. Some of the larger variances were in earned income taxes, which was $173,000 over budget. And this is actually up from the 2019 year by about $200,000. Other taxes, which includes mercantile and LST, were under, with these revenue streams impacted by COVID-19. Interest, you'll see, was down. This was down across the board as interest rates were down for the 2020 year. On the intergovernmental revenue side, this was $422,000 over budget. This was primarily due to the state multimodal grant, as well as local grants for the CARES Act funding and dirt and gravel roads, which was not included in the budget. Special assessments came in $107,000 under budget. And what this primarily is the curbing reimbursements. With certain projects being delayed, you didn't have the related curbing reimbursements from the residents coming in. And the other category was $47,000 over, and this includes the community development contributions as well as the defined contribution pension plan forfeitures. Moving down to the expenditures side, you'll see this was about $1.9 million under budget, which is a 14.3% variance. General government, this primarily relates to the window replacement project being on hold. That was $628,000 under. On the police side, there were savings with wages and in the vehicle purchase. Public safety other relates, this was $195,000 over, and this relates to inspections for permits. And this is primarily due to the significant activity in the former VF area. On the related revenue side, there was increases in charges for services. So while the expenses were well over budget, the related revenues with that stream were reciprocally over budget as well. Public works, the storm and sewer and road reconstruction projects were on hold. So these were well under budget. And with culture and recreation, that was $357,000 under budget. And this was due to the COVID-19 related savings with certain programs not being run as usual. On the debt side, you'll see variances in debt service interest, and down on the other financing sources, the proceeds from short-term debt. While the note was issued, there weren't draws on the note as were anticipated. So those two were all both under budget. So in total, the budget had a use of general fund balance of the $633,000. You'll see the actual results was a positive surplus of $968,000. Any questions or comments on that slide?
None from me.
So moving on to the special revenue funds. The street maintenance fund tax, this stopped being charged in 2020 year. So the results there with the revenues and expenditures were using up the remaining funds within that fund. So that fund going forward is now closed. And the state highway aid or liquid fuels was primarily used for the street lighting, a dump truck purchase, line painting, winter maintenance supplies. And that ending fund balance at the end of 2020 was $131,000. Next slide here looks at the 5-year fund balance trend within the general fund, as well as the water, sewer, and refuse proprietary funds. So overall, you'll see the general fund did have an increase in the 2020 year of $968,000. At year end, this $2.2 million fund balance represents about 1.7 months of the budgeted expenditures for the 2021 year. And the borough does have a budgeted use of that fund balance of the $1,168,000 for the 2021 year. On the, for water, sewer, and refuse funds, Those fund balances are in good financial position, which represent about 13, 15, and 11 months respectively of the 2021 budget year's expenses. So, Melissa, do you have the management letter handy that could be brought up?
Is it in your draft packet at all?
It's not part of the financial statements. I don't know if that came in.
I think that arrived late yesterday afternoon. Your required letters.
That's
Melissa, I
not,
just forwarded it to you.
Right.
while we're looking to bring up the management letter, just a couple other comments. Overall, the audit went well. There was no difficulties that were required to be reported. The audit entries for adjustments were minimal, and we didn't have any reportable matters within our communication letters.
We're still trying to drag this up.
It looks like I can share my screen now, so I have it up. So I'll go ahead and do that. Oh, there you go. And can you click on the one that says 2020 management? Yeah. So the two items that we have in here, first, financial policy consideration. One thing that I mentioned in the presentation was about the general fund balance, which is about $2.2 million at the year end 2020, with 1.1 million assigned for the 2021 annual budget. So if this comes to fruition, the borough would have less than 10% of the budget expenditures remaining in reserves. So what we want to communicate here is just considering establishing what an adequate reserve on hand should be. What we recommend for a minimum within the general fund is looking at 15 to 20% of the budgeted expenses for the next year. So this policy, if you create a formal policy, would serve as a guide for when you're building the annual budget as to how much of that reserve can be utilized to offset your operating deficits and still maintain an adequate reserve within that range. Or if you're looking to build fund balance for specific purposes, having that 5-10 year plan would be beneficial to the borough when establishing these budgets. Then the next item is a very recent item with the American Rescue Plan Act. So this is just communicating an overall summary of that plan. The borough is estimated to be allocated $1,051,000 from those funds. And there's 4 separate categories that have been identified for eligible uses, which I have summarized here. So important things to note is that the municipalities do have until December 31st, 2024 to spend these funds. So you do have time to establish a good plan of use for these funds. It's not something that has to be spent within a year. So you have time there to make that decision and bring that plan to fruition. And then lastly, with the funds that you're receiving being over $750,000, that $750,000 is a threshold that would trigger a single audit under uniform guidance. So if there's funds spent within a single year that exceed $750,000, you'd then be required to have a single audit performed. So this is, if you scroll down to the next page, Melissa. So that's the summary that we have under the 4th bullet point is about the single audit. So what this would be is a audit over your compliance with the use of the these federal funds. There isn't, with this being new funds, there isn't guidance that would indicate that there would be any waiver of the single audit requirement. So as of what we know today, if you do spend over that $750,000, this would be a required additional audit. And this is something that we perform these regularly for school districts, which always receive in excess of the $750,000. So if you do have plans that you think would trigger a single audit, please reach out to us and we'll let you know things to consider before going into spending those funds for a single year.
So Nick, if the receipt of the $1 million is spent over more than 1 year, we could keep the limit under the 750 and not require the single audit, correct?
That's correct. It's triggered by when the expenses occur, not when the money comes in.
Understood. Thank you.
Didn't they say in one of those meetings that they were going to do it over 2 years? You were going to get half this year and half next year?
Right. That's how the money's coming in. So you should be, I can't remember the timing of it, if they said around the June timeframe, June, July for the first 50% of those funds. And then 6 months later, I believe the remainder was supposed to come in.
Oh, it was 6 months.
Maybe it could have been 12.
I thought it was year over year.
Yeah, I thought it was a
There's
year
certainly
apart.
federal funds coming in different streams.
Okay.
So that's all I had for the presentation today. Is there any comments, questions?
I have one. And Nick, if John Woodward here, a member of Borough Council, just as background information, we have more people running for Borough Council and Mayor than I can ever remember, and I've lived here for my whole life. So the question is, and Steve, if you find this to be inappropriate, or Nick, you don't want to, I know accountants don't like to give anecdotal information, but I just would like to know, in your experience, having audited many, many municipalities, what fiscal shape is the borough of Wyomissing in compared to other municipalities? And the only reason I ask that is because I presume closer to the primary, we're going to get letters from candidates that are just saying that the borough's mismanaged and whatever. Could you comment on that?
So the one key thing to note with the borough is, while we have the comment on the general fund balance getting towards a lower end, is that the borough also at the end of the 2020 year doesn't have any debt that's being carried. So being reported under the cash basis, comparing one municipality to the next, a municipality could have $10 million in debt outstanding that they're paying over 15 years yet, but that's not going to show up on their financial statements other than the actual payments that's happening during a single year. So taking out those funds as you need, you have flexibility there. You haven't put yourself into a position where you have debt outstanding and your fund balance is getting to the lower end. So that's a key thing to know. And also the debt is that you have to draw on is at a pretty low rate during these times. So financially, the key thing is having if you can demonstrate that you have the plan, a multi-year plan, 5-10 years going out for the use of funds, that shows that you're being financially responsible and you have a plan in place.
And do other municipalities have plans like that?
Yes and no. Some of the larger ones that I would compare you to would. Other ones, for example, you get single year things that just, especially with the borough, I'd say going forward, all the development that's happening in the VF area is something that's bringing more jobs, more economic development within the borough. So that should increase funds in the future from your related mercantile and earned income taxes. And the other side is looking at what your general fund tax structure is. Have you been increasing rates for years, which some municipalities have to do to maintain that level of fund balance?
Gotcha.
But it's hard
Thank you.
an apples comparison because there's all different quirks to all these municipalities.
Okay. Anybody else have anything for Nick? All right, Nick, sounds like you can be released in your own recognizance.
All right.
Thank you, Nick.
Thank you all very much. Have a good day.
Nick, I'll get the signed letters to you.
Okay. Thank you, Phyllis.
All right, Phyllis, moving on.
All right.
I make an objection at this point, Mr. Woodward. I don't know if this is Hatch Act or whatever it is, but this was an opinion. You're asking an opinion of a person who you hired to give you a political opinion that you want to use against your opponents, not yours personally, but I don't think that is really, right to do that. So, and I'm glad that Nick was evasive about it, because this is not how we do it. You're paying somebody to tell you how great you are.
Okay.
So whatever your opponents will say, and that's it. You take.
Right. Thank you, Mr. Jadik. Public comment is
appreciate it.
over, but
Thank you.
thank you. Moving on.
We ready? All right. Cash and investment totals at the end of March, 8,427,000. That is up from February by 781,000, down from year end by 181,000, and up from the same time last year by 1,338,000. Of that 8.4 million, 4,425,000 is on demand at the bank, with interest rates remaining at just 0.1%. Investments total 4,002,000. Of note, the VIST ICS account you will see is currently at $1,000. At the same time last year, it was at $6,300,000. Was at this time last year, with the continuing fall of interest rates, that the VIST ICS account actually dropped below the VIST savings account. So when that information became known, the funds were immediately transferred back to the VIST savings account. That transfer of over 6 million occurred on April 2nd of 2020, and the funds have remained at the local VIST bank until the CDs were purchased in February. 2 certificates of deposit were purchased in February. The 6-month certificate will mature in August with a 0.2% interest rate. The 12-month certificate will mature in February of 2022 with an interest rate of 4.5. So with the total of 8,400,000, we could add the pending reimbursements from DCED. The request was just made yesterday, totaling 316,000. That represents funds that the boroughs has already dispersed, and we are awaiting reimbursement from the DCED. If that amount was added to the current cash balance, it would bring our total cash up to 8,744,000. Any questions on our cash position at the end of March? No? Okay.
Hearing none.
All right, rolling forward to the fund balance. The March surplus of 1,167,000 reduced the year-to-date deficit to just 160,000. So a huge recovery in the month of March. When that deficit is added to the beginning of the year fund balance of 9,499,000, the end of March fund balance overall is 9,339,000. Of that amount, 707 is reserved for future commitments. I've highlighted in peach the items that have changed since February. To the MS4 commitment, an additional 1 month of the 80,000 that had been budgeted for the year, bringing the total reserve to 260,000. The Equus reserve was previously reported as a net number. During the month of March, the majority of the invoices that had been used to net down the amount that was due to Equus has been paid, with only about 1,000 remaining, and those funds are expected by the end of the week. Additionally, 2 invoices were canceled that were related to 4th Street. Had they paid them, it would have just increased the amount that we would owe back to them. So with the receipt of the additional $1,000 in interest, or excuse me, another $1,000 in invoices that are actually expected by tomorrow, the reimbursement of $170,000 will most likely be included in next week's check run. Does that make sense? With the sewer reserve, we had originally reserved $160,000 for sewer work that was actually quoted in 2020. The first payment app of $81,000 has been made, bringing the reserve on the future sewer commitment down to $78,000. So with $707,000 in reserves, the unreserved fund balance at the end of March totals $8,632,000. Right? The same pending activity for this DCED reimbursement, as well as open permit fees at the end of March, total $322,000. So if the pending activity were to be added to the fund balance, the unreserved fund balance, including pending activity, at the end of March would be $8,955,000. Already included in fund balance are revenues from accounts receivable that are on the books. The general fund receivable of $77,000 is comprised of a variety of open receivables. Those relating to curbing, to mowing, and to sidewalks would have been from previous seasons and their municipal liens on those amounts. The water, sewer, and refuse receivable is a result of the recent utility billing. The first quarter residential billing went out just at the end of March and will be due at the end of April. Any questions on the current fund balance position? Okay, moving forward, we'll look at the March results. When March results are compared by the month as well as year to date, you'll see similar results looking over the 3-year period of 19, 20, and 21. The same is true of expenses if you look at the month of March alone, as well as the year-to-date results. The general fund variance and revenues we'll look at more closely in the next few worksheets. It's primarily due to tax collections. If you look at the highway variance, the liquid fuels has been received for 2021. It came in about 9,000 more than budgeted because we had an estimate that had been provided to us from PennDOT in September when we budgeted, but it is, however, about 27,000 less than the prior year allocation. If you go on to the next one, you can see the net results and the significant transactions in March. Real estate tax collections did begin. Total collections were $652,000. As I stated, the liquid fuels allocation was received for $343,000. The MMOs for the first quarter were paid. They totaled $181,000. Payment was made on the Barwis application number 4 for $116,000. Also, the first application for Mr. Rehab's 2020 sewer work was paid for $81,000. I should also mention that playground registrations opened in the month of March. And of the 36,000 that is anticipated for the season, about a third of that, or about 13,000, has been received so far. Any questions on the March results? All right, we go on, we will look at the gross real estate taxes. What I've presented here is 3 years because 2020 was so unusual. I'm looking at all the bills that were printed and distributed in February. So with the collections during the month of March of 652,000, we were up in terms of dollars as well as percent when compared to 2020, but down when compared to 2019. It was about this time last year when discussions began about extending the due dates for the payment of the real estate taxes. On April 15th of 2020, the state bill was passed that permitted municipalities to extend their discount period as well as their flat period. But in keeping with what was recommended by the county commissioners, the borough passed resolution 2020-10, which kept the discount period intact, but extended the flat period to September 30th. I'm not aware of any action to extend the 2021 collection dates. And so the discount period will remain in April and the flat period will end as it did in 2019 at the end of June. Is Chris Hartman on this call? I don't, Chris, or he is not?
No, Phyllis, I'm here.
Okay, are you aware of any discussion or anything pending that would extend those due dates?
I am not.
Okay. All right. In fact, if you look at the county site, there's actually a notice informing property owners that the bills are actually sent early due to the postal delays that are being experienced. And they remind the property owners that failure to receive a bill does not relieve them from the liability nor any interest or penalties that might be generated by non-payment or late payment. So it looks like they are sticking to those dates as well. You roll forward, we can look at the net real estate taxes. So with the gross collection of 652,000, if delinquent taxes are added, as well as the discounts that have been taken, the net real estate taxes collected in March was 650,000. Again, more than 2020, but less than 2019. What you want to pay attention to is the interim variance. 2020 was unusual in that the Equus properties were occupied and reassessed, and the 2020 interim and change taxes were extraordinary, much more than usual. So of the 95,000 that was collected in interim and change real estate taxes in 20, we only budgeted 50,000 for the current year, going back to usual levels. So I anticipate that that negative variance in the interim tax line will persist for the balance of the year. Any question on real estate tax collections? All right. We move on and look at local taxes. Local taxes in the month of March, 783,000 were collected, more than both 19 and 20. However, in February, we learned that the local services tax receipt that is usually received in February was delayed until March due to the new software processing process that they have. So the more important and more significant comparison is not in the monthly results, but in the year-to-date results, where you can see that the variance compared to 2020 local taxes is net to 81,000 more than the prior year. The variance in the real estate transfer tax is a result of commercial property sales that we discussed in February. Of note, the transfer tax that's pending on the Equus properties is still pending. Michelle has confirmed, however, that the deeds have been recorded and we anticipate the receipt of that transfer tax anytime now. Unfortunately, the timing of the prior month's receipt reports in dollars has become a little erratic with the new management, but I will inform committee when that money is received. And I understand there has been some discussion about reserving those proceeds when they are received, possibly for future public public safety concerns. Michelle, did you have any comment in that regard?
Yeah, so the discussion we have is, and Michelle, remind me again, for the group at least, the amount that we think this tax will be.
Roughly 364,000.
Okay, so what we'd like to do is set up a reserve account of that for those dollars amounts to offset any future unbudgeted expenses that we may have, although we're not trying to have many of them, when things like replacing a portion of a trail to make for public safety and for handicap accessibility. That wasn't budgeted for. The germ killing machine, that wasn't budgeted for. So we can take monies that we have for unbudgeted expenses out of anything that we have with unbudgeted income.
Okay, so upon receipt, I will notify you and add a reserve for public safety. Does that sound appropriate?
Yeah, that's fair.
Is a motion needed to do that, or is that just by practice?
There should be a motion.
I'll make that motion.
Okay, we have a motion to set up reserve for unbudgeted revenues
Second.
and a second. Any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, thanks, Phil.
All right, going on to the earned income tax, there's an, oh, back up a slide. There we go. The earned income tax is showing a nice increase. The mercantile tax, both the Wyomissing and the Wilson portions net to about 6,000, and we'll look at more detail there because there is a proposal to extend the due date for that tax filing. Of concern is the local services tax. In February, there was a huge variance because the usual large distribution that had previously been received in February was delayed to March. However, when the March receipt came in, it did not catch us up, and I have additional detail for that as well. So the net local taxes variance compared to the prior year is $81,000. Now, if you go on to the next slide, Melissa, we can look at the detail of the mercantile tax. So at this time last year, there was discussion about extending that due date to coincide with the other tax filing due dates. The April 15th due date was extended to July 15th. And also the percent of the estimate that was due for the next year's tax was decreased from 100% to 75%. One school district had gone 50%, that was Wilson. Or no, Wyomissing went 15%, Wilson. Chris, do you recall which direction it was? One school district suggested 50, the other one went with 75, and the borough went with whichever one was less.
Yeah, I don't remember the details of that.
Okay, I think Wilson might have been the one that landed on 75.
I think you're right, but I can't prove it.
50%. But anyway, for the current year, the due date, and I believe there is a resolution pending council's approval next week. I think it's under other business in this meeting to extend the current year due date to May 17th, which would coincide with the other tax due dates with the IRS and the Department of Revenue, the Pennsylvania Department of Revenue. But I've heard no discussion about adjusting the percent of estimate due for the next year's tax. Chris, is that true? You've had no discussion there?
That's correct. No, there's been no discussion of that.
All right, so moving on, if we look at the local services tax, as you can see at the end of February, there was a variance of 140,000. When the large distribution that had previously been received in February came in March, we did not catch up, and there is still a variance of $25,000. I wasn't really following why there would be a variance there, so I have reached out to the Berks EIT Bureau. As the EIT tax increases, I would have expected the local tax to rebound a little bit as well. If you look at the borough's workforce, those positions that were not filled last season because of COVID-related closures, that category of worker was already exempt from local services tax. That's the $52 annual payroll tax. that most seasonal workers fall below the $12,000 earning level and already do not pay that tax. So the fact that EIT is rebounding, but LST is not, is a little puzzling to me. So I will let you know if I get any information. I requested that they provide us with some kind of statistics or insight as to why LST would be continuing to drop.
Okay.
All right, so stay tuned on that one. All right, so if we go on to the capital project recaps. During the month of March, the activity that occurred on application number 4, council approved the application and payment was made. That is the reimbursement that we are currently waiting for. On application number 5, the infrastructure committee has approved a payment of $6,447. That is pending council approvals next week. We also received application number 6 earlier this week, which would be worked through the end of March. That would bring the project to about 44% complete. And that application for $165,000 is pending the infrastructure committee's approval. All right. Any question on 4th Street? All right, going on to the sewer project. Activity during the month of March. Council approved application number 1 and payment was made in the amount of $81,000. Application number 2 was approved by the infrastructure committee and is pending council's approval next week. I have not yet seen the application number 3, which would be for March work. That just hasn't been received yet. All right. Going on to the water project. All right. I understand that the original bid was approved by council, but that there's been additional approval of the alternates, which will bring the contract up to about $118,000. And that there is also a pending change order for the addition of fire hydrants that would bring it up to another $7,000 or $125,000, still well under the $157,000 budget. I don't believe there is a definite start date other than just this will be summer construction.
Okay.
All right, if we look at the recap of the capital expenditures for the month of March, total $204,000. On the very first line, you see the Hill Salt Shed. What you see, the $2,500 of materials that have been purchased for the construction. In talking to Jim this morning, the shed is actually complete at this time. There will be additional invoices that follow in April, but we should be under the $5,000 budget that labor was provided by the borough crew. The other capital items that were dispersed during the month of March include the borrower's payment app number 4 on 4th Street. We already talked about the $116,000. The $4,000 in engineering is McCarthy fees that are related to 4th Street, but are no longer being passed on to Equus. Under park improvements, the $1,400 is actually an amount that's continuing to carry over from 2020. That is for the Stonehouse Master Plan. We hadn't budgeted for it to be complete in 2020. It is, however, falling into 2021. I believe with the March payment of $1,400, the project is about 85% complete, and there's about another $5,000 in billings on the contract that remain. So with the March capital project total of $204,000, year-to-date capital project expenditures total $545,000 of the $4,494,000 budgeted. Okay. Any questions related to capital projects?
Mm.
Didn't the chief say they were going to order? They were going to order another police car.
Yeah, that has not arrived or been paid for yet. I'm not sure when the order has occurred.
Is that in the 100,000 total for police vehicles?
Yes.
Okay.
All right. So that's all I have for the month of March. Are there any questions? believe under other business is the resolution that would extend the mercantile due date to coincide with the PA Department of Revenue.
Okay, so we have to approve this, Chris, to send it to council?
Yeah.
All right, so there is a,
Committee, and this matches the schedules that both school districts have already indicated their intention to follow. So we would be coordinating with the two school districts on these schedules.
okay, so then we're looking for a motion on resolution number 2021-06. Should I read this, Chris? The resolution of the council, I can't read that because it's not the council. So what we're doing is making a recommendation to move the mercantile and business privilege taxes to, where does it say it there? From March 17th. Sorry, from April 15th to May 17th. Fair?
That's right.
I'll make that motion, Steve.
Does anybody want to make that motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Okay. Any questions on the motion? All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any against? John, did you have your hand up for a question?
I did not. Are you talking to John Gallen?
I was
Oh,
voting,
John Gallen.
I was just voting aye.
Oh, with your hand up. Got it. Okay. Fair enough. Okay. At this point, we're going to check into what I believe should be a pretty brief executive session to discuss some personnel matters.
Hey, Steve, I just have a question. What has been the past, in keeping with what Nick was talking about in long-range planning and so on, what's been the past policy as to how they decide when they replace vehicles, both on the maintenance side, because that's pretty big expenditures over a longer period of time. Do we have a 5-year, 6-year plan as to this is the inventory of police vehicles and we plan on replacing them 1 a year or 2 a year, or what's the process there?
I don't believe we have anything set up for a 5-year, 6-year plan for vehicles. The only plan I know that we have is for infrastructure projects that we have the 5-year plan for.
I'm not sure it wouldn't be a bad idea. I mean, that is a pretty big expenditure on a regular basis. Maybe, so that there's no surprises, rather than Jim Babb and the chief having to come to us at each year, maybe we do here's the inventory of all the vehicles and the mileage, and here's where we recommend and sort of plot it out for the next 5 or 6 years so that they know where it's coming from rather than waiting until we have a problem.
Keith, I know that they are using a criteria as far as mileage and serviceability, especially on the police department side, and I believe Public Works is doing the same thing, but I'll get together and get their thoughts, and we'll get a policy developed for both of those for you to review.
Okay, thank you.
Quickly, before you go into executive session, did you want to talk about the Parks Department employee in Western Berks, or do you want to wait until after?
I guess we could do that now. So because of the funding that we're getting from the federal government, we've been getting some, let's just say, inquiries on how to use those monies, one of which was from Western Berks Ward Authority. I believe Western Berks Ambulance also reached out to us. At this point, I don't know that we know enough about the money and what strings will be attached to answer any of those questions, but just so everybody knows, there have been some hands out asking us to help spend some of that money. And due to the fact that I'm not comfortable yet knowing exactly how this whole process is supposed to be working, as a typical, government thing, it's here's what you got, but we'll figure out the rules later. I would like to wait to figure out what the rules are before we start handing out any dollars, if we ever hand out any dollars. And that would include Western Berks Ward Authority, as well as Western Berks Ambulance and anybody else at this point.
Michelle, at this point, we still don't have a definition as to how the funds can be used, right?
That is correct, other than the 4 categories that Nick touched on in his management letter.
But didn't they say specifically it can't be used for bricks and mortar?
Wait, there's a couple of potential things we're talking about. You're talking specifically about the 1,051,000.
Right.
That is my understanding, yes.
So we couldn't use it for the public works building.
No, and I would argue at this point, till we hear about the 2 grant applications we have in, you wouldn't want to do that anyway.
Right.
And for the good of the committee, Phyllis, we're looking at every line of revenue where we lost dollars and cents, which would include obviously any taxes. It would include the rec department loss of revenue because it's only top dollar, if I'm not incorrect, top line.
Correct.
Okay. So do we think maybe by next month we'll have a total of what those revenue losses are? We can have a report on what we think the total revenue reduction was.
Sure, I can put that together.
Okay. All right. Any other questions before executive session? Thanks, Michelle. Thanks for reminding me.
I have an objection, Mr. Chairman, against, again, this excessive use of executive session. You mentioned this is for personnel matters. We already had a personnel committee meeting 2 weeks ago. And it's hard to believe that we have that many negotiations, labor negotiations from 1 week to another, or you want to tell me that you really have personnel problems that are so stringent at the Borough of Wyomissing that they need impromptu executive sessions. So what's going on there, right?
We're going to have an executive committee meeting
I
because we
know-
have a personnel issue, some personnel issues to deal with.
Sure, but that tells us that
Thank you, Mr.
there's quite a
Jedick.
lot of personnel issues over there.
Steve, before you do that, did you want to talk about the Parks Department employee and the recommendation from personnel?
Why don't you do it? You'll be better at it than me.
Okay. To bring the Finance Committee up to speed, I had made a presentation to the Personnel Committee about the request to hire a 5th full-time Parks Department employee. At a personnel meeting back in, I believe, January, I was asked to pull together what the prior staffing numbers were in parks, maintenance, and tree going back 5+ years to current. We are currently down from 19 full-time employees, say circa 2010, to 17 full-time employees between Public Works, Tree, and Parks. One of the candidates that we interviewed for a position that was just filled in the Parks Department, we did not offer the position to, but we felt he was an excellent candidate. After interviewing him, went to the Personnel Committee with the request to hire this 5th full-time person. For 2021, we budgeted $1,371,000 for that overall Public Works maintenance category for salary. Phyllis gave me numbers that actual anticipated wages with overtime that's already been spent because of snow removal is $1,103,000, leaving an overage of approximately $267,000. Meaning if we hire this 5th full-time person, even though it's an unbudgeted expense, it will not take the actual budget for those salaries above and beyond what was budgeted for the year. There's also approximately $14,000 cost savings from a part-time position in the Parks Department that we've already cut. And assuming this 5th full-time person would request to be on the borough benefits package at, the family package at a cost of roughly $22,000, there's between that $14,000 savings from the part-time person that was cut and the $22,000 for benefits, you're looking at a difference of about $8,000. So the Personnel Committee had made a recommendation to Finance to discuss approving hiring this 5th full-time position.
Okay, so the other piece of this is we have a certain number of people retiring that we know of next year. And we want to get some of these new people some what I would call local knowledge of the borough, and I think it'd be important to do that. So I don't know that we have to make. I believe the Personnel Committee made the recommendation to hire them. We just need to say we agree with you. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions on this? Comments?
I would like to have one comment.
Go for it.
I am not knowledgeable about what the retirement situations might be. I just know that from years ago, my experience on council, especially with Tom Mull, we always scrutinized staffing levels whenever possible. And even if we are at 17 and we were at 19, doesn't mean that we have to be back at 19. So I don't know what the number of retirements might be, but I would allow some attrition to happen, because looking at a new hire and looking at the numbers for 1 year is not really an appropriate way to look at a new hire, because we're basically making a commitment with pension and benefits for a long time. And so staff, all I'm really getting at is staffing levels should always be examined. A lot of those departments were larger, even further in the past, they were even larger, but a lot of the services have been outsourced. A lot of the big trees and things like that, we don't handle ourselves, for instance. A lot of the mowing, I know that we had outsourced those things long before I was involved with council. So I just caution to watch staffing levels. And the only thing we really can control, our largest expense is our personnel, and the only thing we can control is the level of staffing.
Yeah. John, I agree with you. I agree with you. And one of the things we took reason to do this, quite frankly, is I believe, Michelle, that we know of for sure one person retiring in January. And
One in January and one in later, 2022, both specifically from the Parks Department.
So what we're trying to do, the thought process here, John, at least my thought process, is to get these people, the new people, up to speed, get them to know the local knowledge. And then at that point in 2022, we can determine what, if anything, needs to be replaced from that point.
Right.
I think the other thing you got to consider too, John, is that the labor market is so tight. If you really find really good people that you might be overstaffed maybe for a few months, it's worth it if you can get the right people in the right spot.
John, one of the things that we had to consider also is Dan Macrina was moved into the rec director's position. That left a void in the tree department. Just for the safety aspect of the tree trimming, we need the third man on that crew. When we did find some people that were adept at doing that kind of work, we felt that it was prudent for us to plug that person into that spot. The last thing we need is problems with OSHA if something happens, safety guy on the ground operator. So that was one of our thoughts in the personnel department. And of course, in the rec department, just getting those people, we had the void, and we certainly trying to prepare a little bit for the future. So it was a consensus of opinion. It was a good move to get these two people at this particular time. But we're not going to be overstaffed, believe me.
Right. Good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, all right. So, Chris, we don't need to make a recommendation. We just need to say that we agree with personnel to move forward with the hiring of those people.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So I'll make the motion that we follow the recommendation of the Personnel Committee to add these people to the Public Works, Parks Department, and Tree Department. Is there a second to that?
Second.
Any other questions? All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Now I guess we'll go to our executive session. I believe it'll be pretty brief. Melissa, you'll take care of Mr. Jadick and anybody else who's out there in public.
Yes.
Thank you.
Steve, where were you 14 years ago today?
Wow, Augusta, 14 years ago. Holy smokes. Do we have everybody? I don't know if we have everybody yet. You see they want to take it, to potentially taking that course to 8,000 yards.
So they have to with the DeChambeau hitting that far ball.
Melissa, we got everybody?
We do, yes.
Okay. Then we'll reconvene the public meeting of the Finance Administration Committee meeting. And just to report, we just finished an executive session which discussed personnel matters related to the administration of the borough. Does anybody have anything else, any other business for the good of the group? Okay, hearing none, I'll make a motion that we adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Thank you.
Okay. Meeting adjourned. Thank you to everybody.
Have a good day, all.